Napoleon's Eagles storm in the east, the battles of Borodino and Leipzig. This is a war game published by Compass Games, and it is a war game played entirely with cards. Actually, there are no other components, no dice, not even tokens. Everything is kept track of by using cards. And the game depicts, well, the battles that you see here. I should say several scenarios revolving around those battles. It is a mainly two-player game, one player controlling Napoleon and the other player controlling the different armies that face Napoleon in these battles. But it is perfectly playable in solitaire with some adjustments, but I played it that way. I played it online with the designer, and then I want to thank him for teaching me the game and playing the game with me, and then I played the remaining scenarios by myself, controlling both sides at the best of my limited capabilities. Now, again, requires some adjustment. You will lose some of the bluffing, some of the limited knowledge, but not to the point that the game becomes impossible to enjoy. I enjoyed it in solitaire, and these days of spring 2020, these days of social distancing, well, that's the responsible thing to do. You play alone, you play online. Don't get with a friend to play games because, well, you'll have time to do it in the future. So, a game, a card game slash war game, or a war game in cards. The game, as I said, comes with different scenarios, and you have several player aids, such as this one, showing you the setups, but not only that, also showing you the structure of the battlefield, the structure of the play area. So the players will be sitting on opposite sides of a line of cards representing front lines and separating one side from the other, as you see here. On the two sides of each front card, the players will play cards representing combat units, and behind those you have reserve areas. As you can see, sometimes you have a reserve area shared by two fronts. Some of the times is one front per reserve area. The reserve areas may have connections that connect them with one another, and these are important because these connections regulate movement. During the movement phase, players will be allowed to move cards that represent units from one reserve to the other, or from one reserve to the front, or from one front to the reserve. You have some cards representing terrain, such as these ones, and they go on the side of the card that represent the side that controls that area. And so, for example, maybe right now the French are sitting on our side of the front line, and this means that the French right now control Leipzig, or maybe they control the Galgenberg, and if you lose control of an area, then it goes to the other side. As simple as that. Sometimes you can, in fact, give up control of a terrain to absorb hits, which represents your withdrawing instead of standing there and getting shot at. And the cards may have different effects, different advantages. One side is used when the card is on your side and you're attacking, as you see from the arrow, and the other when the card is on your side and you are defending. So, for example, here, if you're defending in this area, you get an advantage, you get some extra artillery, and other limitations and things apply also. Then we get to the units themselves. We have some leaders, as indicated by cards with the color band here, and symbols that will give you different advantages. Leadership gives you more cards, and so does orders, that is represented by that icon there. Initiative allows you to change the color of cards that are played from red to black, black to red, or different combinations. There are only two colors, red and black. That gives you great flexibility during gameplay. Aces Up is an ability that lets you turn aces, which usually have the value 1, into that numerical value. So from 1 to 10 or 1 to 15, that's a pretty good advantage. Then we have the combat units themselves. They have a strength value, which is what is used to absorb hits in combat. Icons that tell us if that unit is only cavalry or counts as other things, like a combination of cavalry and something else, infantry and something else. This one is infantry and artillery. Here we have manpower, that is a bonus that you use to calculate the total combat value in attack or defense, aces up, we talked about that, and there may be other icons and abilities also. And so just setting up things a little bit randomly here. Suppose that on this side we have these units here. Also, we said you have reserves, and then you have cards that you'll put in the back indicating the reserves. And so suppose that the French have these two in that reserve. The general idea is that players will alternate attacking each other. Let's put some forces of the coalition on the other side. There you go, just like so. Players will alternate attacking each other, will alternate declaring battles. The player that declares a battle in a certain front line flips it with the arrow indicating targeting, well, the defender. So you know who is the attacker and who is the defender. If the other side attacked there, then you will flip it that way. So battles will be declared, battles will be resolved one after the other, and then you, when all battles that players want to resolve in a turn have been resolved, then you move to the next turn. Different scenarios will have different rules for victory conditions, but there is one that always applies. If you are able to empty a front entirely, and suppose that that is the case, and the front is empty, and these cards are there in the reserve. If a side pushes against the front and empties that entirely, first you place a flanked card there to indicate that the fronts that are adjacent to the one that is empty will have a disadvantage. They will lose a card when a battle is resolved there. Also, the side that managed to empty the opposite side can now attack the reserve. There's a procedure to see if you're able to inflict breakthrough hits. Breakthrough hits will demoralize the opponent. And so say inflict the one hit that the opponent was not able to stop, one hit on their reserves after they emptied that one, then I inflict one demoralization. This is the deck of cards that players use to resolve actions. You tuck it under there to indicate the current demoralization. Oh, if not demoralization was inflicted, it's bad, and so on and so forth. And so inflicting a number of demoralization points on the opponent is a victory condition that always applies to all scenarios. So, cards for terrain, cards for the fronts, cards to indicate who is in which reserves, and as I said, also deck cards to actually resolve actions. These have a lot of information, but don't be too worried about that. What matters is the color of the card, which may be red or black. Symbols here on top that may be resolved, may be used, say, for leader's check. There are times in which we check if a leader survives, in which case we draw a card. And if there is a symbol, the card matches the symbol perfectly, then the leader is dead. If it doesn't match, like in this case, then the leader is taken out of the game temporarily. So when you do a leader check to see if the leader is injured, both players draw a card, compare. It's a pretty exciting little procedure. Cards can be used for melee. They are high value cards. When you play a card for a melee in a defense against an attack, you win. You defend successfully automatically, but the card is removed from the game, so that's a big loss or a considerable loss. And then other areas are used to resolve different things specifically, and it's pretty self-explanatory. To resolve artillery attacks, breakthrough damage that I mentioned earlier, cavalry charges, and recovery. In some situations, recovery is automatic. In other situations, you draw a card to see if the unit that may or may not recover. You see what happens. Now, in the back of the rule book, you have a pretty good sequence of play, which can feel a little daunting at the beginning, but it's not too bad. And again, one thing that I have to tell you, the game did feel a little daunting to me when I first played it, but simply because it's very different. It's not like I could repurpose a lot of things. Okay, zone of control, lines of supply, I know that. this is a game that makes a lot of sense, but it's also maybe very different from other games that you play, and precisely because of that may feel a little intimidating at the very beginning. So a turn starts with a preparation step in which you advance the turn cards. I said everything is a card in this game, so the turn track is also a turn mini deck. Then players will shuffle their decks from the previous turn, so the decks are reset each turn. Then you may do, some units may have been exhausted from the previous turn, that means turned by 90 degrees, and then you unexhaust them. So there are a couple of steps like that. Incidentally, actually, since we are talking about that, there are several possible states for a unit. A unit may be fresh, like in this case, exhausted, turned by 90 degrees, and disrupted. If a unit takes a hit from exhausted, it becomes disrupted. If it takes another hit when it's disrupted, it's out of the game. Being exhausted does not change your disrupted and disrupted status, and it allows you to absorb some hits, but it also means that now the card has limited functionality because there are certain actions that a unit that is exhausted cannot take. When you're finally ready, you have the movement step, which is when players, as I said, can move units from a reserve to the other, or from a front to a reserve, from a reserve to a front. This is also when units may rally if they are in a reserve and the reserve is in command. There are situations that may take it out of command. Then a disrupted unit will rally. In other cases, well, automatically. In other cases, you have to take that rally check. Some units have the ability to rally in position, that is to rally when they're in a front, but not many can do that. After movement and rally, which is part of movement, that is a unit may rally instead of moving, then you start resolving battles. When you start resolving battles, then again the battle is declared, like you see here. And players draw a card. The standard number of cards that you draw is 4. You draw an extra card if you have combined arms. That is, you have the symbols for artillery, cavalry, and infantry. Like that would be in that case. I have them all. Plus, you may have a leader sending orders there. Napoleon can send 2, and that means we get 2 extra cards. There may be other things also that may alter the number of cards that you have, such as we mentioned, getting flank, which actually reduces your cards. So after all is said and done, suppose that these are the cards that the 2 players have. So each player will have a hand of cards. The attacker chooses a card and plays it. And the opponent can choose to withdraw right there, or to stay and defend. If the opponent stays and defend, they will have to play a card, and that card has to be of the same color as the one that was played. So to defend against that red, the defender can only use red. And the total of the attack is the number you see there, say 15, plus manpower. This would be a +1. And then you also have, and then you may also have, oh gosh, why am I blanking here? Other modifiers. There you go. That always works. For example, you may have the aces up and things like that. Yes, that's what I want to say. Cavalry charges. Players can also perform cavalry charges to add to that value. When you perform a cavalry charge, you draw a card from the deck and you add its value. And cavalry charges can only be used to add to an attack, not as their own independent thing. So you calculate the total attack for the attacker, and the defender must defend again using at least a card, cavalry charges, manpower. And so here to respond to this one, we'll be in trouble. Just to make it more interesting, suppose that actually the defender has these cards in hand, and so by playing these 2, we should be able to match 16 and 16. All cards are discarded, and now the battle can continue because the attacker can play more cards to attack. Basically, the battle continues until either one of the 2 sides has their side completely empty, and then you may perform a breakthrough attack, or until the attacker cannot play any more cards. And now the attacker decides to play this one, which would make a total of 5 power 9 if nothing else applies. And booyah, we play this one. And so on and so forth. Now, if the total cannot be stopped, suppose that now we play a 10 and the opponent has nothing that can be played. We even add the cavalry charge, let's say add that a 3. Now there's a number of points there that the opponent could not stop. If even just 1 point could not be stopped, then the opponent has to take damage. To absorb that damage, what you can do is you can give up terrain cards if you have them, and in this case the terrain card absorbs a number of points equal to the strength here. So I could give you this card, give it to your side of the battlefield if I have it, and that would absorb 5 points. Or I can take a card and flip it to the other side, and that pays for the cost that you see here. For example, for strength, that could absorb 4 hit points if I flip it to the disrupted side. I could then actually eliminate it to absorb 3 more points. You can also exhaust a unit by turning it by 90 degrees, and that absorbs 3 points. So one way or the other, you must absorb all the points, and suppose that, again, after that is said and done, after you have absorbed all of the damage points that you were supposed to, your side of the front is completely empty, then breakthrough attack can take place, at which point the attacker can commit infantry units and cavalry units to perform those breakthrough. To resolve the breakthrough, you draw a card from the deck for each unit. Say now we're checking the cavalry, and you look at the breakthrough. That will tell you what happens to the unit. Say this unit is disrupted, but then also the number of disruption points that are inflicted on the opponent. There will be 2. The number in parentheses is used by cavalry when fighting in defense. And then we check for this other card, which is infantry. We check again the breakthrough, and this infantry is also disrupted but inflicts 2 points. So now with this attack, breakthrough inflict up to possibly 4 demoralization points, and the opponent can now commit cards from their defense. And the same idea, you draw cards to see how many points, but this time the defender will subtract those breakthrough points, and what happens to the defender. If after this there are breakthrough points inflicted by the opponent that have not been cancelled by the defender, they will result in demoralization points. The difference between the attacker's points and the opponent, if more than one, is demoralization points. There are a couple of other things actually. For example, when a battle starts, and I mentioned this, you have a phase in which you resolve artillery, and simply you draw a card and you look at this phase here. So with this result here, if I had 7 points or more artillery, I would inflict 1 hit on the opponent. Here I only have 1, so that does not apply. But suppose I drawn this card and still doesn't apply. I see the one, I thought, oh, this one applies. So that is how you resolve artillery. Pretty simple. Oh, but I have 3 points of artillery actually. And so look at that. I inflict 1 hit on the opponent. These hits are different from the breakthrough to an extent, and they may be absorbed by withdrawing units, by exhausting units, by this kind of thing, by disrupting a unit, etc, etc, etc. Also possibly by discarding a card from hand. This is how it works. Again, it sounds complicated, but it's just because, at least to me, because it's so new and different. Fret not. The idea is you play these battles. During a battle, the attacker starts playing cards. The opponent has to defend, matching the color and matching or exceeding the power of the attack, applying all the effects to manipulate a lot of things. Continue like this until the attacker gives up or one side breaks through. Perform the breakthrough checks for the attackers and the defenders, possibly inflict demoralizations. Continue like this, battle after battle, turn after turn, until the scenario reaches its conclusion based on the victory conditions of the scenario. Napoleon Seagull's Storm in the East. I like this game very much. When I read the rulebook, which is not long, it's maybe 6-7 pages of actual rules, so it felt daunting. I had a hard time really putting it all together in my head, just because there wasn't any of my usual hooks that I could use, no other knowledge from other war games that I could repurpose. Say, in war games, I haven't read rules about line of sight in a long time. Because if a game has that, I see, oh, it has line of sight. I don't read it because in any case, then if it doesn't make any sense to me, I'm going to use my own understanding of what should make sense a line of sight. So that's the way it is. But there was nothing here that I could take for granted. And so it's a whole new system that you have to learn, but it's not that hard, really. I mean, at the heart is I'm going to play a card, add modifiers, and you are going to try to play cards with of the same color, using modifiers and abilities to match my attack, at least to defend effectively. Otherwise, you have to make decisions on how to absorb hits. If there is a breakthrough, then both the attacker and the defender, or whoever is affecting the breakthrough and whoever is receiving it, will have to make decisions on committing units to inflict or prevent demoralization points. At the heart, this is what it is. And now if I boil it down to this, now you're thinking, but that's just isn't that just like war? I play a card and see if your card has the better numbers. Isn't now too simple? Well, no, it's not, because of all of these other effects, all of these other unique abilities, because different scenarios play differently. Then you do have a game that has some really interesting decisions here, where you commit your units, which part of the front you're gonna leave less guarded, or you're gonna concentrate some attacks on, how you take damage. That is almost more interesting than inflicting damage, although that is always fun, because, well, you can deplete a unit, disrupt a unit, retreat it, exhaust it. Exhausted always seems like, that's easy, doesn't really, nothing happens. They're like, oh, I really wanted that unit to do that action, and I can't because it's exhausted. Moving units around is such a simplified board and play area, so to speak, but again, it makes sense. Commanders may give you bonuses when they are in the reserve area, but they're more effective when you put them in the front line. But then you lose Napoleon and you lose the game immediately, as very well should be, because the front line is more dangerous. Terrain, such a simple way of representing it. Here's my card, here's your card. By flipping it, it does different things. And yet you see the armies as one is taking a hill and the other one is moving back, and now they have a better position for their guns, so they have an artillery bonus. You're hiding in the woods, which prevents certain things, and I really hold on to that one until you take control of it. And certain things are better, certain terrains will give you a great advantage in attack and not really in defense, or vice versa. Such a simple idea, and yet it really works. In fact, for a game that it's just cards and you don't have the traditional map, it still feels very thematic. I think that a lot of good work was done here in designing the scenarios, not just in designing the system, which is solid, but in designing the scenarios that really have that historical feel. I really like the Leipzig scenario, in which Napoleon is trying to prevent the opponents from getting together and creating really a strong defense. So before they can really get in position, Napoleon needs to inflict some early damage. Once they are a compact front, then things become much harder. By then, Napoleon will have some of their units disrupted, even if you were able to disintegrate some Cossacks here and some Cossacks there. Then your own soldiers are depleted. If you lose Leipzig, you lose the game. So, and there are several scenarios around Leipzig. Just as a flow, I like that better more because there's more stuff to chew on. The Borodino scenarios are also fun, but they feel more like intro scenarios. So I like it. I like the back and forth. I like, once you get past the fact that you have to learn a whole new system, it's a whole new system, so fresh, so innovative. Then you have to think about all new dilemmas that the old systems didn't give you. The flow, the pace of the game is fun. The game is thematic, interesting, tough decisions. So I like all that. And it is really a kind of game that works in these days of social distancing. Because 2 players, if each player has a copy, then you can play it online remotely on Zoom, on Skype, FaceTime, whatever it is that you're using. Because there's never a deck of cards that is shuffled together. So each player has their own decks of cards, of action cards and troops. And so you set up your own side of the front, and the opponent on the other side of the world sets up theirs. So each has their own copy of the front. So, and of course, when you take a terrain from me, I give it to you, so I remove it, and you take your own copy and you place it on the table on your side of the front card. Perfectly playable that way. I played that way with the designer, and it was fun. Now you're thinking, but how can I play solitaire? I also play solitaire, and I know I'm used to the process more than maybe other people, so to me it's not a problem. And I think, but then you know both hands. Well, when you play the game against another person, the first play is completely, you're just poking their front and see what gives and what holds. And so the first time it's like a play. Okay, I'm going to play a 20 black and see what happens. From that point on, however, there are chances that you figure out something about the hand of the opponent. Maybe they don't have anything right there. Then you already know that. Or maybe the opponent, you played a 20 black and they play a 5, a 3, and a 6. And use something else. I'm like, okay, I don't think they have many black cards. Maybe they're doing a bluffing thing, but that usually doesn't pay off. So in truth, when you play against another human, is only the first really moves of a battle that are completely in the dark, which also, I like it thematically. Can't wait for a game in the system of Waterloo, because I think it would work really well with the French trying to poke holes in the front of the Allies. The Prussians are coming, and you don't know exactly the strength of the different things. So the fact that you attack a little bit in the dark, but then you figure out what the opponent can do, feels very thematic. And actually, so if you simply are playing solitaire, you play both sides at the best of your possibilities. During a battle, you draw the cards of the attacker. You can also draw those of the defenders, but you don't look at them. You play the first attack, and then you pick up those of the defenders. You get a lot. You get a lot of what you would get in a back and forth, in which, again, after the first play or two, you get a sense of what the opponent has. So I played solitaire, and I enjoyed it. I really enjoyed it. I think it's a solid game, and again, it is a game that you can play even in these difficult days of social distancing. So Napoleon's Eagles is thematic, it is fun, it has a nice pace, it has a lot of tough decisions. It can be a nail biter as a battle goes back and forth and just one side loses or wins. It's by just so little. It has tension, it is fun and thematic, a lot of different scenarios. I really enjoyed this first implementation of the system, and I can't wait to see the system applied to other campaigns, other battles of the Napoleonic Age, because I think it really captures a lot of things and a lot of flavor from that historical period. Napoleon's Eagles, fun game. Highly recommended to anybody who enjoys this period in history and to war gamers in general.